Josh Giddey just underwent ankle surgery this offseason, and yet Chicago's new front office is already publicly signaling something that would have seemed almost unthinkable a year ago, that he's genuinely part of this team's long-term core. I've gone through everything happening with Giddey's recovery, what the front office is actually saying about his future, and how crowded this young roster has become around him. Every quote, every stat, every insider report. Let's break it all down right now. So before we get started, go ahead and hit that like button and subscribe to the channel, because Giddey's entire journey with this franchise has been a genuine roller coaster. Let's start with the injury itself, because it's a genuinely important storyline heading into training camp. Giddey underwent arthroscopic surgery on his right ankle back in May, with the Bulls confirming he'd be sidelined from basketball activities for approximately 3 months. That timeline lines up almost perfectly with training camp, and the team has consistently maintained he's expected to be ready when camp officially opens. It capped off a genuinely frustrating, injury-plagued season for Giddey overall. Despite posting career highs across the board, 17 points, 9.1 assists, and 8.3 rebounds a game, hamstring and right ankle issues limited him to just 54 total appearances, his lowest games played total since his rookie season back with Oklahoma City. Chicago finished that season 12th in the Eastern Conference at 31-51, missing the playoffs for a 4th consecutive year, a genuinely difficult stretch for an organization that's been searching for real direction for quite some time. Posting genuine career-best numbers while still missing nearly 30 games is exactly the kind of frustrating, bittersweet outcome that leaves both a player and a front office wondering what a truly full, healthy season might have actually looked like. That difficult season triggered real organizational change too. The Bulls hired Bryson Graham as Executive Vice President of Basketball Operations, replacing the fired Arturas Karnisovas. And the team also found itself searching for a new head coach after Billy Donovan chose to resign against ownership's wishes, reportedly wanting to avoid a potentially awkward situation working under an entirely new front office regime. That's a lot of organizational turnover happening at the exact same time Giddey was working his way back from a significant surgery, adding real uncertainty to what his actual role and standing would look like once this new leadership group settled in. Walking into a new job with an entirely fresh coaching staff and front office structure is difficult enough for any rebuilding franchise, and doing it while your most prominent returning player is simultaneously rehabbing a significant surgery only adds another layer of complexity to that transition. Here's where the story takes a genuinely encouraging turn for Giddey specifically, though. Despite all that uncertainty, and despite his name floating around in trade rumor discussions at various points, Bryson Graham and Chicago's new front office reportedly view Giddey as a genuine part of the team's core moving forward. That's a meaningful signal about the direction this rebuilding franchise intends to take, especially coming from a completely new decision-making group that owes him no particular loyalty and could have just as easily viewed him as an expendable piece to be moved for future assets. It's worth remembering just how contentious Giddey's own contract situation actually was before this point, too. His restricted free agency dragged out for a genuinely laborious 10 weeks last offseason, with Giddey initially seeking something in the $30 million annual range, while Chicago held firm around $20 million a year for a significant stretch of those negotiations. At one point during that stretch, Bulls insiders publicly acknowledged growing concern that the two sides might never reach an agreeable point at all, warning fans that Giddey's days with the franchise could genuinely be numbered if talks stalled out completely as training camp approached. The Bulls eventually increased their offer into the $85 to $90 million range over 4 years before the two sides finally settled on a 4-year, $100 million deal, a real compromise that landed roughly in the middle of where both parties had started. Giddey later expressed genuine relief that the process had finally wrapped up, specifically disputing any suggestion that he'd grown frustrated with the front office at any point, saying he never once worried he wouldn't end up staying in Chicago, and pointing to a strong relationship with both his teammates and the coaching staff throughout the entire ordeal. Now, even with the front office publicly backing him as a core piece, there's real, legitimate debate about exactly what kind of long-term building block Giddey actually represents. According to a recent Locked On Bulls breakdown, the question genuinely comes down to whether his size, passing ability, rebounding, and knack for organizing an offense are enough on their own, or whether Chicago still needs to see real, meaningful growth from him as a shooter and defender before fully committing to him as a true foundational piece of this rebuild. It's a fair question given his career shooting numbers have never been a genuine strength, and a young, still developing roster like this one needs its supposed cornerstone to eventually round out those specific weaknesses rather than simply relying on size and playmaking alone. Plenty of successful rebuilds have been anchored by exactly this kind of oversized, pass-first guard. But the ones that truly thrive almost always feature a player who eventually adds enough shooting gravity and defensive competence to avoid becoming a liability once the games actually start to matter in the standings. That question becomes even more relevant once you consider just how much young talent is now competing for real minutes and roles around him. Chicago's training camp roster features Matas Buzelis, Caleb Wilson, Dalen Swain, Noah Essengi, Jalen Sellers, Leonard Miller, and Rob Dillingham, among others, all fighting for legitimate NBA opportunities on a rebuilding roster that's suddenly overflowing with unproven, high-upside talent. Training camp itself is genuinely positioned to reveal a lot about which of these younger players are actually ready for real NBA minutes right now, and which ones might need considerably more development time in the G League or in a more limited bench role before they're trusted with anything consequential. It's the kind of camp battle situation that rarely gets fully sorted out before the regular season actually begins, meaning the pecking order established in October could easily look completely different by the time the trade deadline rolls around next February. It's genuinely rare for a rebuilding team to have this much simultaneous roster competition at multiple positions, and it puts real pressure on both the front office's evaluation process and the new coaching staff's ability to actually sort through it all in a condensed training camp window. Giddey, as the one player already publicly anointed as a core piece, arguably has less individual pressure than most of his younger teammates fighting simply to make the roster or crack the rotation. But given the ongoing debate about his defensive and shooting limitations, even his own path forward isn't entirely settled just because the front office has expressed public confidence in him. Step back and look at the complete picture here, and Chicago's entire situation heading into this season represents a genuinely fascinating test case for a rebuilding franchise under brand new leadership. Bryson Graham inherited a roster with real questions at nearly every level. A core piece in Giddey coming off ankle surgery and a genuinely contentious contract negotiation. A completely reshaped coaching staff and an unusually deep pool of unproven young talent all fighting for the exact same limited playing time. How this front office navigates those overlapping challenges during training camp is going to say a lot about the direction this rebuild actually takes over the next several seasons. So here's where everything stands. Josh Giddey is expected to be ready for training camp after undergoing ankle surgery this offseason, and Chicago's new front office under Bryson Graham has already signaled they view him as a genuine part of the team's long-term core. But real questions remain about whether his game as currently constructed, strong passing and rebounding, but limited shooting and defense, is enough to anchor a rebuild on its own, especially with this much young, competing talent now fighting for roles around him heading into a genuinely pivotal training camp. Between the injury recovery, the contentious contract history now finally behind him, and the crowded young roster surrounding him, Giddey enters this season carrying more organizational weight than any other returning Bulls player. A genuine test of whether he can grow into exactly the foundational piece this new front office has already publicly committed to. So tell me what you think. Do you believe Josh Giddey should be viewed as a true foundational piece of this Bulls rebuild, or does he still need to prove considerably more as a shooter and defender first? And which of Chicago's young players do you think emerges from training camp with the biggest role heading into the season? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel so you catch every update as it happens. I'll be back soon with more Bulls news.